Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to this ICS conversation on China's defense modernization, restructuring and postures, implications for India and recent developments along India-China border, hosted by the Institute of Chinese Studies. We have as a media partner, ThePrint. This afternoon, we'll explore the very important theme of how the COVID pandemic has impacted China's hugely ambitious defense modernization and restructuring programs, the progress of these initiatives and their applications for India. We'll also discuss China's military postures and recent developments along India-China border areas, where, as you're aware, we are currently in the midst of serious Chinese intrusions and standoff situations. To make sense of these complex and sensitive issues of great significance to us, we have with us two of our finest military professionals, Lieutenant General D S Hooda and Lieutenant General S.L. Narsimhan. Both have had top command positions in the Indian Armed Forces and have been following China very closely for several years. General Hooda has been the Northern Army Commander when his responsibilities included the borders with China and Pakistan. General Narsimhan is currently a member of the National Security Advisory Board and Director General of the Center for Contemporary Chinese Studies. Welcome, General Hooda. Welcome, General Narsimhan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Before we start the dialogue, let me explain some ground rules. For the first half an hour or so, I'll have the conversation with General Hooda and General Narsimhan, when we'll mute all other participants. Participants are requested to keep themselves on mute to avoid any ambient or background noise. For the Q&A session, participants are requested to use the raise hand option available at the bottom of the participants list. Questions can also be sent to me through the chat option. I'll call on participants to raise their questions or offer their comments. The concerned participant will unmute himself or herself. Other participants are requested to keep themselves muted until the moderator calls upon them. Well, now that we have finished these ground rules, let me move to the real business of our conversation. I'll begin with a question to General Narsimhan on the progress of China's military modernization program. General, you'd recall that at the 19th Party Congress in October 2017, President Xi Jinping set 3 development benchmarks for the PLA, which included 1, becoming a mechanized force with increased informatized and strategic capabilities by 2020, 2, achieving the status of fully modernized force by 2035, and 3, becoming a world-class military by mid-century. How do you assess the progress achieved by the Chinese military to move towards the benchmark, especially the one set for 2020? Will the COVID-19 impact China's military modernization, at least in the short run? Would like to have your comments on these issues, General Narsimhan.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador Kanta, for getting me over to this panel, and my respected senior colleague, General Hooda, sir. I haven't spoken to you for some time, but nice to be with you on this panel. At the outset, I would like to flag one issue, that is, in 2006 Defense White Paper, China had given another timeline. And that timeline was 2010 by first phase, 2020 the second phase, and 2050 the third phase. That is how they had given in the Defense White Paper of 2006. But now that timetable seems to have changed a little bit. With the kind of reorganization that Mr. Xi Jinping announced in 2015 November, which has started getting implemented from 1st January 2016, the reorganization that they had planned, that is basically the creating of theater commands, the creation of the strategic support force, etc., and the reorganization of the Central Military Commission and the theater and the military regions. All those things were to be completed by 2017, and those have been completed. Officially also, they are given the confirmation in the NPC, in the earlier NPC. The second thing is the second phase, that is the 2021. In the 2020 timeline, they were supposed to be completing the informationization and mechanization. In the 2006 Defense White Paper, they have mentioned that they finished the modernization by 2020. I get a feeling basically because of the kind of churning that has happened in the PLA in terms of command and control and organizational structures, they needed more time. So by 2020, they have said they'll finish the informationization and mechanization, which I am confident that they will be able to complete that. And the third one is a long-term one, that is 2049. They want to win wars on the global scale, and so therefore they want a fully modernized PLA to come up by that time, 2035 and then 2049. 2035, when they say the full modernization has to take place, what they imply is whatever they have set out as the number of platforms and other associated equipment for the Army, Navy, and the Air Force would be inducted by that time. Two, they would have practiced and got to high levels of jointness and integration between the armed forces. All those things they expect to complete by 2035. By 2035, I expect they also will improve their expeditionary capability. So that is how the 2035 timeline looks like. And 2049 timeline is basically a global scale. You find, we can discuss it later in the other question that you may ask. At the global scale, they want to influence the operations wherever they take place. As far as COVID is concerned, whether it has brought in certain amount of certain amount of delay in the modernization program, I for one don't believe that it is going to slow down the modernization program. And the reason for that is we have been monitoring the launching of ships. They have been going on schedule. We have been monitoring the space launches. They have been going on schedule. We have been monitoring the exercises. They have been going on schedule. Even during COVID, they seem to adapt the exercises to cater for the COVID. So the exercises have been on. The satellite launches have been on. Ships have been on. Induction of the aircraft is on. So therefore, I don't see a major downturn in the modernization process. I'll stop here, sir, on this question.
Thank you. So your general conclusion is that there has not been any significant disruption caused by COVID-19 as far as both progress of modernization and restructuring of PLA is concerned. Okay. Let me now turn to General Hooda. A couple of questions relating to the recently concluded session of National People's Congress. General, you'll recall that at the NPC session, China boosted its defense spending by 6.6%, which was the lowest increase in the last 20 years. Yet, this number is significantly higher than China's likely GDP growth rate in 2020, which is assessed by the IMF to be around 1.2%. Do you see any impact whatsoever of this slowdown in Chinese economy as a result of COVID-19 and progress of PLA in different areas?
First of all, sir, let me thank you for calling me for this panel, and it's very good to be here with General Narsimhan and so many distinguished people who are here. Now, I broadly agree with what General Narsimhan has said. Yes, their defense expenditure was growing at more than 10%. It slowed down a bit. But any impact that it will have on its modernization, I feel, is only temporary. I think they will have sufficient funds available to be able to meet their goals. If there is one problem that I see, and it's not really related to funds, but related to technology. And what I'm talking about is, and I'm not sure we've looked at this aspect enough, this technology decoupling that is happening between the US and China. For example, the latest move by the Americans to say that even foreign companies cannot sell semiconductors to Chinese telecom companies, which have been manufactured using American technology. Now, how far this sort of ban will go? Could this, to some extent, at least in the high-tech areas, where China has been, surpassing bans, etc., to be able to get access to high technology, whether this could, to a certain extent, impact on what they're looking at in high technology areas. As I said, sir, I think this is an area that maybe needs a little deeper introspection, because there is a huge technology war that is going on between the US and China. And if they lose access to this kind of high technology, would that to some extent impact their modernization?
This is a very important point General Hooda has raised. General Narsimhan would like to come in on this point. This general, decoupling between economies of USA and China, and especially, denial of technology to China in certain in specific areas. Will it impact modernization of the Chinese PLA to some extent? Or Chinese are essentially prepared to move towards, self-dependence or self-reliance in keeping with their goal of Made in China 2025 and other major projects they have launched?
I'll make 2 points. One on the defense budget and second on the technology. One is last year, defense budget was $168.2 billion as far as the official figures are concerned. And thereafter, this year, the inflation rate has been 3%. You cater for that. And then you cater for the growth, GDP growth of 1.2%. If you cater for all this, the figure should come to somewhere around $175 billion. At the moment, the figure announced is $178 billion. So what has happened is that the diversification between the rate of economic growth and the defense budget has again come up this year. That means the defense budget is going to grow more than what the economy grows in China. So that is something that calculations clearly indicate that they will be able to get more funds, even though the economy is going to do badly. The second point related to defense budget is most of the equipment that they are produced indigenously. So they have more value for money as far as the defense budget is concerned. In our case, a lot of money goes out on foreign exchange, and so that becomes a little difficult to, our indigenization process is slow. The second point on the technology, I fully agree with General Hooda, but there are also some activities that Chinese have undertaken that we need to consider. One is basically the technology denial is taking place. On that I have nothing to add. Actually, that is going to delay to some extent the technological advantage that Chinese are trying to get. But what they have done, the entire IT systems in China are going to be changed over a period of 3 times to indigenous make. So every year they are planning to convert 30% of their equipment indigenous. Second thing, there is a denial of the semiconductors. So what they have done, they have started placing the orders on Huawei to replace those semiconductors. So what they are doing is they understand that there will be a technology denial. There will be problems in their modernization. So they are slowly and steadily taking actions to overcome that. So what will be the effect of that on modernization? Instead of 2035, there may be a certain amount of delay, which General Hooda also would agree with me, I'm sure. But somewhere down the line, they will probably reach that goal. And 2049 is still very far to actually affect any kind of thing that could happen, even in the technology denial. So, and in some sectors, like example, artificial intelligence, quantum technology, and quantum computing, all those things, Chinese are actually doing a very, very concerted effort to get to world leadership positions in these. So these are things that are already happening in China. We need to closely monitor that. There may be a bit of a delay because of the technology denial, but ultimately they will be there.
One aspect you just raised, Narsimhan, is this mismatch between China's economic growth and its defense budget. Defense budget is expanding at a faster rate than GDP growth rate. When it comes to India's defense budget, I would like to understand, not just defense, but generally, what are the implications of China's military modernization and restructuring for India? Do you see the military capability gap between China and India widening in the wake of COVID-19? According to CIPRI estimates, as you know, last year China's defense budget was $261 billion, whereas ours was 71 billion. The Chinese were nearly 4 times size of India's defense budget. Indian economy is likely to be more affected by COVID pandemic than the Chinese economy, which might aggravate the resource crunch our defense forces are facing. Against this background, in this scenario, how do you see the implications of China's military modernization and restructuring in the wake of COVID-19?
You would like me to take it, or you would like General
Yes,
Hooda to
yes. So
answer
General
this?
Narsimhan, if you could answer, and then we'll come to General.
I lost you in between. Was that the question?
The question is to me. I answer that question.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it only because of COVID. This is a process that has been going on for over a period of time. And over a period of time, our indigenization process and Make in India did not go up the way it was planned. So there was an issue there which is being addressed at this point in time. You would have heard the finance minister announcing certain categories of equipment and weapons which are being produced in India will be on a negative list for import. Slowly and steadily, I think this is going to get increased. The list is going to get increased, and more indigenization is going to take place. So that is the way to go. Notwithstanding that, the gap is actually a little too large. So therefore, you need to look at different ways of actually matching up and increasing your deterrence. That is basically through asymmetric capabilities, etc., about which I'm sure I'll request General Hooda also to pitch in into this. But the kind of modernization that we are seeing in the PLA and the effect that it is going to have is something different. As I mentioned earlier, by about 2035, we expect a more joint-oriented, more integrated operations capable People's Liberation Army. Second thing we need to understand, the whole of the Indian theater is now being looked at by the Western Theater Commander. So that is something which has happened because of the modernization process and the reorganization that took place. It gives him the capability to handle the entire theater in one particular go. That is not without problems. As you understand, Western Theater Command actually today is over 60% of the geographical area of China. So for any army commander, any theater commander, it will be extremely difficult to orchestrate operations in various kinds of terrain within his command. Those are command-related issues. Influence in Indian Ocean and beyond over a period of time, I expect that it will increase. As it is now, we know that approximately people have made statements everywhere. Approximately 7 to 8 ships are seen at any point in time in Indian Ocean region. So that may likely to increase. But my emphasis will be on PLA Strategic Support Force. PLA Strategic Support Force is the one which is going to do two things for the PLA. One, all the space capabilities are with the PLA Strategic Support Force. And the second part is the information warfare capability that is also handled by the Strategic Support Force. In the reorganization process, the PLA Strategic Support Force has got elements in all theater commands and the lower level headquarters. So which implies that their capabilities and their integration is going to be much better. The next one is on the PLA Rocket Force. The Rocket Force has been modernizing itself over a period of time, and more of multiple warheads is being talked about. So therefore, it is going to be a force which is capable of conducting its warfare in a much better manner than what it does now. I talked about artificial intelligence. You please look at, when you look at the expeditionary capability, earlier, before the organization, they used to have 2 Marine brigades. Now, they've got approximately 7 Marine brigades. And they're expected to increase it to 100,000 strength, which has come out in the open in the various media and other places. So if you look at this, the expeditionary capability is also trying to increase. I'm not trying to spread some scare because of the PLA. Don't worry about it, that is handleable. But the thing is, we should know what they're capable of so that then we prepare ourselves. You look back, two aircraft carriers are already on. The third aircraft carrier is under construction. But the problem they will have is in the aircraft and the pilots. It's extremely difficult to train carrier pilots. So it will be very difficult for them to do that. That will be a problem that they will face. And you look at the acquisition of ports and creation of bases. Today, only morning in the Twitter, you could see the Gwadar ports photographs have been put out as to some secure compound has come up, etc., etc. So the acquisition of ports and bases is something that we need to watch over a period of time as to where all these come up and what will be their capability. Overall, I would say, even though the differential may be more, it is not that it can't be handled. It has to be handled in a different manner. But we need to understand what their capabilities are. I believe their capabilities are going to grow.
So, General Hooda, would you like to come in on this issue of growing asymmetry in military capabilities of India and China? Can you hear me, General Hooda? Okay, let me continue this conversation with General Narsimhan in the meantime. You know, General, there is a growing view that China looks at the present COVID era as a strategic window of opportunity, and that it is inclined to be more assertive in a range of issues, from Hong Kong to Taiwan, from South China Sea to territorial issues with India. No, it seems to believe that it has a relative advantage as the first major country to be on the path to recovery from COVID, while the USA, Europe, and even India are still struggling to cope with the pandemic. Do you agree with this assessment to China's strategic intent?
Actually, I would not like to contribute, I would not like to attribute any strategic motive to these border incidents. The reason I'll explain. Hong Kong.
No, I was asking a general question. We'll come to border a little later. Yeah.
I'm not asking only about the border. What I am trying to say is Hong Kong, Taiwan, and South China Sea issues have been on even before COVID. Hong Kong started sometime early last year and it continued over that year. Taiwan again, ever since Tsai Ing-wen has come into power, there has been a tussle going on. Though the Hong Kong issue actually supported her to win the elections in some form. South China Sea, China has been aggressive over a period of time. It is not only that because of COVID it has happened, but over a period of time they have continued to be aggressive in all these places. So therefore, that is something which I would say that, it is not only related to COVID, it is part of a general aggressive behavior that we see that these things are happening.
So COVID hasn't quite cramped China's style, but they are not,
it has not.
Aggressive.
It has not cramped their style at all.
Okay.
I think General Hooda is back, sir.
General Hooda, are you back? Can you hear us, General Hooda?
Unmute yourself, sir. Hooda, sir, unmute yourself.
Yeah, better.
Great. Then we'll turn towards recent developments along the India-China borders in the western sector and Sikkim. General Hooda, one question which is being asked is how serious are the Chinese incursions in face-off situations, some of which are still continuing. There is a pattern of Indian and Chinese troops coming face-to-face along the LAC. Do you see the recent incidents being different and more worrisome in nature compared to what generally happens?
Yes, sir, I do. What you're saying is right. There have been normal face-offs. There are normal face-offs that happen every year. So last year in Ladakh alone, as per media reports, there were almost 500 face-offs. But the point is, these 500 face-offs don't lead to the kind of incident that we've had. And I say this is much more serious for 3-4 reasons. One is, they've come completely well prepared, and they've come prepared to do things by force. We've never seen this kind of level of violence. We've had Chumar, we've had Doklam. Restraint was always the key between both the armies. And now we are seeing the kind of violence that has taken place between both the sides. We are seeing that, this has happened at a large number of places. It's not been restricted only to one location. Earlier incidents were all localized. We also knew what exactly the red lines of the Chinese were.
Narsimhan would like to come in the meantime.
Yeah, I'll do that. Till the time he gets back online, let me do this. Yes, what he said is absolutely right. First thing is, earlier on, whenever the face-offs used to take place, it used to take place in one place. I mean, there were no multiple kind of face-offs that one could see. This time around, face-offs have been multiple. It has also been geographically spaced out. Geographically also they have been displaced in the sense that Sikkim also happened, Pankung Tso has happened, Galwan has happened. So this is one thing that is different from what it was earlier. The second thing he alluded to the numbers, which again I agree with him. The kind of numbers that we see is not the kind of numbers that we saw in the earlier face-offs. And the third thing is the aggression part of it. They seem to be more aggressive this time. Not that we are not aggressive when it happened, because when it happens, you have to be matching that. That's a different issue. But the fact of the matter remains that the aggression has been more than normal. Having said that, we also take into account how did he get so many forces. Basically, this happens to be the exercise season for him in the area of Chisil Jilga, Kangsiwar, and those areas up to Taksgorgan. So this area generally will have troops around this time. May to September is the time when he does the exercises. He also comes with some mechanized units, etc., etc. And so these troops are available to him. But the fact of the matter, since they have come in these numbers, it really appears to me that there would have been some kind of planning little earlier than the face-off that happened. Hooda sir, you back, sir?
Yeah, back. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You can answer. You can continue to answer that question.
Why don't you complete General Narsimhan, then he'll come in again. Yeah.
So basically, these troops are available to him because of the exercises that were going on. So that helped him to do this. But some amount of planning definitely would have gone through before he did any of these face-offs.
Would like to add something, General Hooda?
Yeah. I think another key difference is, and I was trying to bring out that issue, all other incidents were locally triggered. So if you saw Chumar, Doklam, both were locally triggered by some action. You want to build a road in some area. We were absolutely clear what the red lines of both sides are and what are the demands of the two sides. So one side wanted to build the road, one side said, no, you can't build the road. And therefore, we also knew what are the steps towards resolution. I'm not sure we know all this in this particular case. What is it that the Chinese want? Why have they come into so many areas? Maybe the defense know, maybe the military officers who are negotiating know. Will they ease off and just quietly go back after having sort of invested so much and come to these areas? So there is a great element of certainty in a particular situation. And that for me actually adds to the risk and possibly the difficulty in resolving it on both sides.
General Hooda, you have been Northern Army Commander. Did we have a pattern of Chinese incursions in the Galwan River Valley? You referred to intrusions or face-off situations in areas like Depsang, Demchok, Chumar, those areas we have had, problems in the past. What about Galwan River Valley? Is it a new area they're coming into?
Absolutely. So of the areas that we are hearing about, the area of Hot Spring, and there is some talk about areas called PP14, 15, then obviously there is Galwan River. And then there is Pengong-so. Pengong-so, there was always a little bit of difference in perception of the LAC. There are 8 fingers, so through which finger does it run? But again, let me tell you that both sides were able to patrol up to their perception of the LAC. So if we felt that our LAC is up to finger 8, we would patrol up to finger 8, and they would come up to finger 2. And there was no sort of violence. If anything happened in between, then there were protocols that when patrols come face, you would go back. In Galwan, the alignment for both sides is absolutely clear. There is in perception. And similarly, in the area of springs and areas to the north, there was never any issue. So that's why, again, we find that this is slightly different from the past, and it's not a normal sort of patrolling standoff.
Okay. We have understood that what's happening is somewhat different in nature compared to both routine occurrences along the border, as also what had happened in case of face-off situations in 2013, 2014. Now, can we try and understand what are the motives behind Chinese side? What is driving the action this time? And this question I'll pose to both General Hooda and General Narsimhan. Let's begin with General Hooda.
So let me say what I think it is not. So it's not a normal standoff, as you said. I don't think it's too much to do also with infrastructure development, which people are talking about, the DS-DBO road. The DS-DBO road has existed since the last 10 years. It was made. Even the bridge on Shok River was first constructed in 2016. And then it was improved and inaugurated last year by Mr. Rajnath. So I think this is an excuse. I think their motives are to put some pressure on India. If you look at their commentaries in Global Times, they're talking about India should not align with the US. I think there is an element of coercion and there is an element of pressure. Now, what do they want out of this? What will it take for them to be satisfied? What will it take for us to be satisfied? I am not in a sort of position to answer. But these are not normal things, that there is a difference in perception of the LAC. So this happened, we built our infrastructure, that's why they're doing this. I think there is a much larger message that they want to send out to India.
So there's a larger messaging which is going on from Chinese side to India about what we should not be doing, both vis-a-vis certain bilateral issues and larger issues relating to our relations with USA or Indo-Pacific for that matter. General Narsimhan, what is your take on motives behind Chinese action?
I think two things have surprised them. One is, even though General Hooda said that infrastructure has been going on, but I get a feeling that they are not clear why this infrastructure is coming up in this manner, the way it is coming up. They also laid a objection to one of the bridges that are getting constructed there. So what my understanding is, I think they're also unsure of what we are doing in that area. That is one of the reasons I think this could have happened. In addition to what General Hooda said, I tend to agree with them to a major extent.
Now, one issue which I wanted to raise with both of you, that what kind of denouement or resolution do you say is for the current standoff? We heard yesterday that now there'll be talks at the level of lieutenant commanders, lieutenant generals on two sides. There've already been contacts established at diplomatic level. How do you see the situation developing? Do you expect an early resolution, or there's a risk of escalation? I'll pose this question to General Narsimhan first.
Okay, I sincerely hope there will be a disengagement, and the reason is because I have based my assessment on a few issues. One is other than Global Times, if you look at People's Daily, or if you look at the PLA Daily, or you look at the social media, there has been no major flare-up of articles or anti-China, anti-India articles, etc., etc. The Twitter thing that we saw about a couple of days ago, it started from an Indian side. It kept flaring up. The moment the army spokesperson gave a version of saying that it is not authenticated and it should not be forwarded to people, automatically the Twitter posts on the other side also went down considerably. That is the second thing. Third thing, I am also basing this on the spokesperson's versions, which have come up on 3 different occasions. Even today, the Foreign Ministry press briefing, the spokesperson, the way he has made the statement, it actually gives a sense of non-escalation. I won't say de-escalation, it is non-escalation. And the Chinese ambassador here also has been making that statement. On the ground, daily at the local commanders level, meetings have been taking place. Twice, in fact, thrice at the major generals level, the talks have taken place. We don't see any kind of pushing, pulling, or animosity in those meetings either. So all this, when you put together and see, I get a feeling this will get resolved amicably. I can't place a time frame. 6th June is the day on which the GOC-14 Corps is expected to have the talks with its counterpart. One can't really predict what will happen out of these talks, but I get a feeling over a period of time the disengagement will take place.
We would like to share your optimism. We don't want to see escalation in the situation. Now let me turn to one of the root causes behind recurrent border incidents. That is ambiguity or differences on the perception of LAC on two sides. Way back in 1996, in the India-China agreement on military CPMs, two sides agreed to move towards a common understanding of the LAC, clarify and confirm the LAC. We even started exchanging maps, did so for the middle sector, but then Chinese sort of, put the entire process of exchange of maps in a stalemate when it came to Western sector. Do you think we need to revive this process, which is lying dormant for nearly 18 years now? Move towards clarification and confirmation of LAC with a sense of urgency? I'll pose this question to General Hooda.
Absolutely. I mean, today the problems that we have with the Chinese every time along the border is only because there is a differing perception of the LAC on both sides. And the minute you have a common perception delineated on maps, this whole business of our perception, your perception, we are only patrolling up to your area, or this will all disappear. So this is the only way I think the border can remain calm. The problem, as you pointed out, sir, is right now the perceptions of the two sides are so far apart as far as how the LAC runs. As you mentioned, when they saw the maps of the western sector, they just returned it, and after that, talks just finished there. So I think there'll have to be a little bit of give and take. There'll have to be some. But if one problem to go away, then the only way is that the LAC is delineated on maps. Why are the Chinese not doing it? And I think that gives rise to a certain amount of suspicion that they find this as an easy pressure point on India. They want to keep some pressure going on the LAC whenever they feel that there is a need to needle India in some places. Otherwise, as you said, both sides have agreed, and I think this is one thing that needs to be done on an urgent basis.
Okay. General Narsimhan, do you agree with that assessment that Chinese are disinclined to have clarification and confirmation of LAC, let alone move towards resolution of the boundary question, because they would like to retain this issue as a major pressure point vis-a-vis India?
To some extent, yes, I would agree with that, in the sense that the reason why probably they didn't want to exchange maps on the western sector seems to be that it was not a very comfortable thing for them to do, and on the eastern sector either there'll be problems when we change these maps, if at all it comes to that. But my point is, even if we can't clarify the LAC right across the full length of the LAC, can we at least start doing it in the sensitive and the disputed areas, so that that is where most of the face-offs is. So if at least in those areas, if we could clarify the LAC, that will go to a larger extent of reducing these face-offs on the border.
Okay. One last question
may I just make?
Yeah, please. Yes, please come in, General Hooda.
May I make my just short point, sir? I think, what General Narsimhan is saying is, if we could at least look at disputed areas. And I think one good model, sir, is how we resolved Chumar. So the resolution was on grounds that there'll be moratorium on patrolling in this area for a period of X number of days. That neither will you patrol nor will we patrol. And I know that moratorium sort of continued unofficially over the next 2 years. And Chumar, which was seeing almost 100 intrusions a year, it went down to 0. Maybe some arrangement in areas which are disputed, in areas which there is a differing perception. The current protocols are not working, which are that 2 patrols will come face to face, you will go back. It is being violated more and more these days. So maybe we need to start looking at some fresh protocols for disputed areas. That could possibly work.
I think that's an important point. Let me move to my last question. That is asymmetry in border infrastructure between India and China, with China holding an advantage. How much of a concern is this? I'll ask General Narsimhan and General Hooda, both of them, to answer this question. And have we closed the gap in recent years? Let me begin with General Hooda.
Yes, we have closed the gap in recent years, but yes, there is still a fairly large differential as far as infrastructure on both sides is concerned. We have attempted to speed up, particularly road construction, in the last few years. Unfortunately, we keep saying we are doing better, we are doing better. Honestly, we are not doing too well. Because if you look at the data of last 3 years, I think 16, 17, 18, which is available on the net, the number of kilometers of road that has been built each year is averaging about 100 kilometers. So that's the kind that we are doing every year. So infrastructure needs to be built up. Are we at a tremendous disadvantage? And here I will say no, because in some ways to compensate for lack of infrastructure, our deployments along the LAC, our defenses along the LAC are very strong, I mean, compared to what you see on the other side. So our defensive deployment is very strong, which in some ways compensates for a lack of infrastructure in areas leading up to the LAC. And I think second place where we have made
General Hooda, we seem to have lost you. Can you hear General Hooda? Yeah, you are back now.
Can you hear me now?
He's back online. Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I was saying, So I was saying we have closed the gap a bit, but I was saying much more needs to be done. But it isn't as if we are completely weak on the LAC because of lack of infrastructure. So we have compensated our lack of infrastructure by creating very strong defenses along the line of actual control. So our deployments are very strong. And so our ability to deal with the border incidents is there. So it isn't as if a lack of infrastructure is hampering our ability to respond to the kind of border incidents that we have. And the second point I was making is that we have made significant improvements in our tactical airlift capability, strategic airlift capability. I mean, we moved a whole armored regiment in 2015, 2016 by air to Ladakh. And that ability to be able to move to certain areas, where infrastructure is not good enough, that ability exists. So I think it's not as if we are at a complete disadvantage vis-a-vis China.
General Narsimhan would like to add something on this issue?
Yes, sir. The thing is, I fully agree with the General Hooda, because there are a couple of things. Since he has commanded the Northern Theatre, I was in the Eastern Theatre as a Corps Commander. The problem was, it is not because of lack of effort that we are not able to make progress. There were extraneous factors, like, for example, the kind of terrain that we are making the roads in. Whatever we tried, we couldn't make that kind of progress that we would like to have made. So effort has been on to bridge this gap of infrastructure. Even now, I'm aware there are a lot of effort that is going on in the corridors of South Block to push this infrastructure building. I'm sure, given about 4 to 5 years, I am very hopeful that we will be able to catch up on the infrastructure.
Well, thank you, General Hooda. Thank you, General Narsimhan, for this initial conversation we had. Now we are opening the floor for questions. Participants can raise their question either by raising hand. You have this facility at the bottom of the list of participants, there's an icon there, or you can pose your question in the chat box. Is Jyoti around, Samanvay?
Yeah, she's there. I can see her.
Jyoti, are you there?
I'm here, Ambassador.
Okay. Jyoti would like to start the open Q&A session with questions to both generals.
Right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Kantha, and thank you for this partnership between the Print and the Institute of Chinese Studies. You've asked actually a lot of the questions that we wanted to ask, and I was wondering if I could, after me, if you could request Snehesh Philip. He is the Print's defense editor, and he's also here on the webinar. My first question to you both gentlemen, General Narsimhan and General Hooda, is you talked about the pressure that the Chinese want to put on India and regarding the border conflict in Ladakh, the ongoing conflict. Now, you use words like coercion, pressure. But the question is, why are the Chinese wanting to pressurize India? What is the reason? After all, in the National People's Conference recently, when Wang Yi's press conference, the foreign minister's press conference, there was no mention of India at all. They just talk about the US and Hong Kong and other things. There's absolutely no mention of India. So what is this coercion or pressure that you're talking about? Or why is this coercion?
Yeah, Narsimhan, will you want to go start?
Okay. Okay. You see, the pressure is in terms of, I get a feeling, the pressure is in terms of the line of actual control. and how that is being managed at this point in time. So that seems to be the reason that this thing has happened. More, I think General Hooda will be able to cover on this.
No, but why? Why are they putting this pressure?
No, the pressure is not. It is not actually. Sorry, go ahead, sir. I'll come after that.
Yeah, come in, General Hooda.
Yeah. So Jyoti, I think you have to look at it in a larger geopolitical context and see what is happening around the world. And you see around the world, there is a fair amount on China. There is literally a Cold War going on between the US and China. And China is not willing to give, and see their reactions which are happening with regard to Australia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, what is happening in the South China Sea, etc., etc. Coming specifically to India, Jyoti, if we think India and China are some very friendly neighbors, I'm sorry, that is not the case. We have an outstanding border dispute. We have differences over Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh. We have seen at various forums, China would like to oppose India's position in various international organizations. They see US, they see India as growing closer to the. They're obviously worried about groupings like Quad, etc. Now you might say, was this the time to do this? And we don't know. When somebody's got his back to the wall, they are pushing. They're pushing aggressively everywhere. And therefore, I think it's part of the larger sort of geopolitical narrative that is playing out, that China wants to show the world that please don't think we have been weakened by COVID. You see the talk that President Xi Jinping gave and what he told his military. Again, it's not directed at anybody. I just think it's a message going out to the world. So that's my sense of what is happening today.
Jyoti, do you have another question?
No, so it would General Narsimhan answer the same question, please?
Okay, I have a little different take on this. I mean, yes, things are happening around the world. I have no quarrel with that particular kind of argument. On the LAC, when these things happen, I am not really sure whether those other events are linked to this. This could have very easily happened because I was not on ground, nor was General Hooda, and so we actually don't know how these things flared up on ground. But the fact of the matter remains that when the things happen on the LAC, things have flared up. But we can attribute more kind of reasons to this. But to my way of thinking, it was a simple events that happened on ground, maybe with some planning, as General Hooda mentioned, because these things could not have happened without prior planning, at least at the Western Theatre Command level, if not beyond. So that kind of thing would have happened. I'm not sure whether we should be linking all this to all the other events that are happening. That is the way I see it.
Okay, Jyoti, do you have another question?
Yes, I do. My
please.
Snehesh is also here, Ambassador Kantha.
Yes, sure. He can also ask a question.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Snehesh, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you so much, Jyoti. This is General Hooda made a very interesting comment, and he said that the current protocol seems not be working, and it's time for new protocols. Now we have this meeting between the Lieutenant General, that is a 14 Corps commander, and the commander in the southern Xi'an military district. Does it, as per the established protocols, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as per the so-called established protocols and the trend that was there, that it used to be held at the divisional commander level. I'm told that never before has the corps commanders been involved in talks to settle a dispute. So does this show that the current system of the protocols has failed to achieve what it wanted to achieve, and it's also an escalation in ladder, and which gives a sense of how serious the issue is? To both General Hooda and General Narsimhan, sir.
General Narsimhan, why don't you start?
Okay, I'll start. You see, the problem with newer and newer protocols is it's one more protocol. You already have enough agreements, enough protocols on ground. If those are not being followed, to have another protocol will only be good enough if both the sides agree and follow it. So that is where probably we need to work at making the already existing mechanisms work more efficiently. I think that will be a better way of doing it than going for a new protocol. And if that protocol is also not followed, then actually you have nowhere to go. You have to go for another protocol. So my reading is we have already agreements 93, 96, 2005, 2012 BDCA agreement. All those agreements are already existing. And based on those, a lot of SOPs and protocols have already been made. Our effort should be to make those protocols work more efficiently than to bring in more and more protocols. And then, if it's not working, another protocol, I'm sure, will not work either.
General Hooda? General Hooda, can you come in? I think there's connectivity problem. Jyoti, Snehesh, do you have another question?
Yeah, can I just quickly ask?
Yeah, please.
Question,
Yeah.
please? So for several years, for decades, all you guys, some of you who are in this webinar have been involved both in diplomatic talks as well as military talks on demarcation of the LAC on the boundary issue, but nothing seems to have worked. And the last one was in 2005, the political parameters and guiding principles. Now, are you saying perhaps that with the demarcation or the resolution of the boundary dispute, you're willing to do an as-is, where-is settlement of the boundary? So both vis-a-vis the western sector and the eastern sector.
See, what we are saying is clarification of LAC. It has got nothing to do with the boundary discussion that have been going on. Am I audible?
Yes,
you're audible.
Yeah. What we are trying to say is clarification of the LAC, so that at least the face-offs are reduced and the behavior on both sides of the border becomes more amenable. We are in no way saying that anything to do with the border settlement part. That is a larger issue that has to be taken up differently, and I'm sure eminent ambassadors are here on this group at this point in time. They all know what has happened earlier. My point is, and what General Hooda also mentioned, is that LAC, if at least we can clarify it, at least where he and we stand on that, then we can work out a methodology of reducing the face-off. That is the point we are trying to say. It has got nothing to do with the resolution of the border or settling down on a status quo or whatever mode. We are not saying anything of those.
Okay, thank you. Ambassador Vishnu Prakash wants to ask a question. Vishnu, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. A question in two parts. One, Mr. Manish.
Keep it short, Vishnu.
Very short.
Okay.
Mr. Manish Tiwari, the Member of Parliament, has referred to General Hooda in an article in the print where he says that China has been nibbling away at, I'm not the exact words, but China has, I think he has said that China has illegally occupied Indian territory. And Ambassador Sham Saran had also done a piece in Hindustan Times where he refers to or alludes to nibbling away at the territory. So is it a fact that over the years we have lost territory? And then again, taking up from what General Hooda has just mentioned, China is under so much pressure. Xi Jinping wants to appear strong. So obviously, as you said, they will not just walk back. So what could be the possibility, if at all, if there are any thoughts by the two panelists, what possibly could be the contours of a settlement?
General Hooda would like to come in first.
So I don't think I have sort of ever mentioned anywhere, any talk about nibbling action or something. I think what has happened many years ago. So I was seeing some recent articles also about, how about pasture grazing lands by the locals have got lost, etc., etc. From what I can remember, at least in the past 15, 20 years, there has been no real change in what we felt was the alignment of the LAC, or that we have in some areas accepted or stepped back. The patrolling points numbers were given by the China study group. I don't remember the exact year, but many years ago. And those patrolling points are sacrosanct to the Indian Army, and ITBP and the Indian Army is patrolling those limits. So this this nibbling thing, it's certainly not. It's not certainly something that is happening on a regular basis, or has happened in the recent past at all. As far as finding a resolution, Ambassador, as I said, we just don't know what. I mean, for me to say that this could be a possible resolution would be difficult, because I just don't know what they want. Unless you know what the other side wants, I mean, for me to suggest a resolution.
Okay. Yeah, General Narsimhan?
This talk about Xi Jinping's status, etc., etc. I personally believe that his status is as good as it was earlier. I don't see a weakening that has happened to him as far as the positioning of himself as far as within the country and other things are concerned. So that is something which has got nothing to do with what is happening at this point in time. The solution which Ambassador Vishnu Prakash was asking is actually what I mentioned earlier. At least temporarily, we need to get back to where we were earlier. That is the point I would like to say again.
Well, we have a question in the chat box from Manoj Joshi, and I'll relay this question to General Narsimhan. He wants to know about autonomous command structure of Tibet military district.
Can I ask it directly?
Okay, please do that. Go ahead, Manoj.
I'll frame it. My question is that two questions. One is, you mentioned about the theater command, the Western theater command looking after the entire Indian front. I just wanted to know, doesn't the Tibet military district have an autonomous role in that whole process? That's one question. Second question is that after the Border Defense Cooperation Agreement, there was some talk about a code of conduct between being discussed by the two sides. And one of the points that repeatedly came up was China saying that, why don't you freeze your border construction? Meaning they've been apparently, even before the BDCA, they've been trying to push us to stop our border construction for reasons I think some of them have been explained here earlier. But I just wanted to know something about this COC, meaning what is the status of this COC?
On the Tibet military district, I understand where that question comes from, basically because there was a statement that was made that the status of the Tibet military district will be upgraded and then placed under the PLA headquarters. This was the statement that came up. My understanding of that is you cannot have in a war which within a theater command having two command and control systems functioning. That will never work. So my understanding of that was, even though the Tibet military district will be upgraded and placed directly under the PLA headquarters, that will be for peacetime handling of Tibet and the problems that they face within Tibet. Come war, I get a feeling this entire command will be under the Western Theater Command. All the forces that are within the Theater Command will be placed under the Western Theater Command. So while during peacetime there may be a different command control structure, but whenever some issue that comes up, the Western Theater Command will be the one which will be orchestrating the entire operations within its area. That is the first point. Second point on the BDCA, I'm sure Ambassador Kant will be a better person to answer this.
No, I'm just moderating. Go ahead.
It's not the question of the BDCA happened. Thereafter, there's a working mechanism also that is working on ground. It is not that things have not happened. Irrespective of, any kind of demand may come. The Chinese may say something to us, we may say something to them, but nothing is going to stop our infrastructure development in any form. We want to do infrastructure development, we will do it. And we've got no qualms about it. So that is something that I don't think that should even worry anybody on this case.
So my sense on ground, my sense of infrastructure, my sense on ground, having seen what is happening in Ladakh, they do complain about our infrastructure. It's mostly in areas which they consider disputed. So if we are doing something around Demchak, for example, even if it was a civilian sort of infrastructure, they would raise objections. If we did something in that Chumar area, built up some infrastructure, they would object. But there was certainly no objection at all on road building, which is happening in the rear areas, or other roads. We built roads right up to the LAC, where we felt neither they had a problem nor we had a problem about perception. And we had roads going right up to the LAC and they didn't object. So their objection largely is, my sense is, in the disputed and those areas.
Okay, we have some more questions in the chat box. There is a question by General Rajiv Narayan. I would like to pose your question directly, General. Can you hear me? If not, I'll just try to sort of paraphrase the question.
No, I have read that question, sir. I have read that
please
question.
go ahead.
What it asks is, see, as the time goes by, say 2035, etc., China would like to dominate more and more areas in Indo-Pacific, and it will require basing facilities. With the kind of animosity that China is facing today, China will be able to get those facilities? I think, if I understood that question correctly, that is the question that was there in the chat box. The answer to that is, please look at the way China has been going around acquiring ports and terminals in various places, including airports in many places in Europe. These are at the moment commercial ventures. Basically, they have invested, they have got the entry into these ports, etc., etc. At the moment, he'll be able to dictate to some extent the commercial activities. Please look at the way slowly and steadily Djibouti was just been taken, it has been converted into a base. There are many other port acquisitions that are taking place all over the world. If I have to plot it on a map, there is no continent in which the port acquisitions are not taking place. I've already plotted it in some slides. I'm not brought the slides to this discussion today. But to summarize this, what I am trying to say is, at the moment, most of the acquisitions have been commercial. But when he can convert them into something which is for a dual purpose, is something which we can't do at this point in time. But the animosity you're talking about is unlikely to work in his acquisitions. Even today, with all this animosity that you see, you find a lot of people still wanting to do business with China. So that is something that will go on for some more time. So we need to be careful about this, and we need to monitor it very closely as to what all areas he is showing interest in and whether he'll be able to convert them into a dual purpose facility.
There are a couple of other questions in the chat box. I would like to combine them and pose to both generals. One from Fmr Hooda, my colleague. He wants to know whether, to deal with the asymmetry in capability we have vis-a-vis China, do we need to have offensive capabilities in border areas? I'll ask General Hooda to take this question. And the second question, which perhaps General Narsimhan can respond to that, do you see a pattern? This is from Usha. Do you see a pattern in terms of Chinese behavior in South China Sea and what they're doing along India-China border areas? General Hooda and then General Narsimhan.
Yeah, so talking about symmetry and offensive capability, certainly there is a requirement of offensive capability. I mean, we just cannot be completely defensive all along our borders because then you are going to lose territory, or you're going to lose troops or forces in some areas. So obviously we must have the capability to take the war, if required, into Tibetan territory. And I think that was the logic behind creating the Mountain Strike Corps. I think the larger issue is, I think we need to be clear how the war with China is going to be fought. Is it going to be fought in a traditional manner across the Himalayan watershed? Is it going to be somewhere and in areas where they have much greater technological capability than we have, for example, cyber, space, missile technology? I think that's where we need to now focus a little and see how a future war with China is going to play out, and where we need to build our own capabilities in terms of cyber, in terms of air defense. Frankly, we just don't have a counter to Chinese ballistic missile capability. Right now, it just doesn't exist. And they have something like 1,200 short-range ballistic missiles. I'm not even counting the intermediate-range ones in their inventory. How are they going to be using those? Will that be against strategic targets? How do we protect it? What kind of pressure is that going to build on our military leadership and our political leadership when strategic targets start getting bombarded. So I think the whole range of how a future war with China is going to be fought needs to be thought through, and not merely that let's just build up a mountain strike core and that should do our trick. I think it needs a more comprehensive discussion and look.
General Narsimhan, on the issue of if there's any pattern between South China Sea and India-China border areas?
See, on South China Sea, I see a pattern which is continuous. And the reason for that is we should understand that the single draft negotiating text on which the code of conduct is to be finalized is still on. So you will find any country that is probably put in a counter to that or their worries into the single draft negotiating text will come under pressure. You find Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, all of them are being put pressure on by the Chinese, not because of COVID, not because of anything else. It has been on for some time. So this is something that we get to see as a constant kind of a thing that is happening. And more with the view that the South China Sea, in the influence of China in South China Sea is increasing, and at some point in time will be really good influence. If you want to compare that with what is happening in our border, I don't think we should compare it in that manner. These are different, as I mentioned earlier. Even though other events are happening all around the world, I don't think that we should take a link from there and say because of those things it is happening here. These are happening. These were happening earlier. There was some amount of difference in what is happening now. That is what we need to look into and resolve. I don't see a pattern existing between South China Sea and us.
Well, thank you very much. We still have several questions in chat box. Unfortunately, we run out of time, so we'll have to bring this webinar to a conclusion. Before I do that, let me say that I believe all participants will agree with me that we had excellent discussions with the two generals, two very thoughtful generals who know China very well, who know situation along India-China borders very intimately. When we thought of this webinar, at that time, we were planning to discuss, how will COVID-19 situation impact, China's modernization, China's, reforms and restructuring in the military domain. But then, certain developments took place, so we had to discuss, situation along India-China border areas as well. I think we go away with some important conclusions and takeaways, including this assessment from the two generals that the COVID pandemic will not seriously impact the trajectory of China's military modernization and restructuring of Chinese PLA. Both those processes will continue more or less uninterrupted. I think there are some important implications for India of that conclusion they have arrived at. As for situation along India-China border areas, both the generals believe that we have a complex situation. The current situation is different from routine, border incidents that keep taking place along India-China LAC. But while situation is more serious, they're optimistic that we will be able to find a solution to the current standoff, though it might take some time. We don't know how much longer it will take. On this positive note, I would like to bring this webinar to a conclusion by thanking General Hooda, by thanking General Narsimhan, and by thanking all of you for participating. We had some fascinating discussions today. So all the best to all of you. Take care, stay healthy, stay safe.